I'm Rosenlee. I'm president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association, representing 13,500 teachers across the state. First, I want to make sure, can you all hear me? Is everything good? Okay. Today, we're out in front of Central Intermediate School. This represents over the 50% of schools in Hawaii that are over 65 years old. At this school, you will find bathrooms that have broken stalls. You will have water fountains with black mold on it, and that is a problem that we have across the state. We have children learning in classrooms that have holes in the roof. We have classrooms that when it rains, it pours into the classroom. Our children are learning on broken desks. And unfortunately, every day we put them into environments that are not conducive to learning. And the main reason is because we do not fund our schools well. We rank 45th in the nation in per pupil expenditure adjusted for cost of living. Just this past week, Hawaii was ranked as the worst place in the nation for teachers. And since 2010, we have seen the amount of teachers leaving Hawaii has increased by 84%. And because of that, for the first time, we have over 1,000 classrooms that do not have a qualified teacher. About 1/3 of our students, or 60,000 children, every day go to school and do not have a qualified teacher. We have got to increase funding for our schools. And the way to do that is we are looking to tax second homes over $1 million. Our opponents are using fear to try to scare people. In Hawaii, less than 4% of homes are second homes over $1 million. These wealthy investors cannot win this ballot question on their own. So the only way they're going to win is by convincing people to vote against their self-interest and to vote against their own children. And to do that, they're going to scare everyone by saying that we're going to go after renters and we're going to kick grandma out of her house and we're going to close all businesses. That is not true. That is deceptive, and they're doing that only in the interest of scaring people. The city and counties, instead of trying to only fight and be beholden to these outside investors, they should be fighting for the keiki of Hawaii. And they should be trying to be able to focus on how we fund our schools. And that is why we are asking people to vote yes on the constitutional amendment to tax second properties over $1 million to make sure that we can finally make sure that all of our children are learning in schools that are conducive and healthy to learn.
I'm Deborah Zysman. I'm the Executive Director of Hawaii Children's Action Network. We are a local-based nonprofit, and we are a movement of families and organizations who advocate on behalf of our children. Large topics that we advocate on are education, health, social welfare, and also economic justice to make sure that we're supporting our lowest income, our middle income families, to making sure that they can thrive. We are supporting a yes vote on this constitutional amendment. It's an issue we've been working on for several years now for numerous reasons. Number one, we believe strongly that our schools, our public schools and our charter schools are still severely underfunded. We know our per pupil expenditure is 45th in the nation, and if you go and visit schools, we know our infrastructure is way out of date. Some places in our charter schools we have kids learning under tarps. We think that is unacceptable and unconscionable, that our kids deserve good quality public schools. We have also been working for more than 20 years on expanding access to preschool and trying to get to a point of universal preschool for all of our children in this state. We know that in order to do that, we will need funds to build out classrooms, to hire new teachers, to get to that point. So Hawaii is still really lagging behind most other states in building out an early education infrastructure, and we have been strongly passionate about that for years. The DOE has estimated that to build out the classrooms we'll need to serve 1/3 of our kids in 10 years. It will take about $500 million of new money to do that. So we believe strongly that the best way to invest in our community is invest in our kids. Invest early, invest in prevention, invest in our schools. That's the way we're going to have the workforce we need of the future, but it does take an investment. And we don't think that currently within our state budget there's enough places to scrimp and save and cut to find enough money for major repair of our schools, building new charter schools, and certainly not to build out the early education system that we've been advocating for.
Aloha. I'm Deborah Bond-Upson, and I'm one of the founding board members of Parents for Public Schools of Hawaii. Parents for Public Schools of Hawaii was founded following Furlough Friday. Our founding principle is that every child in Hawaii deserves access to a quality education. We've been working for that for the last 9 years. After working for years for additional funding for schools, because we know we do not have a system that has equity for all our students, we saw this constitutional amendment come about, and we strongly favor it. We decided to co-found an organization called Fund Our Hawaii Schools. We now have 6 organizations who are part of this. We have individuals joining it as well. We know we're going to need a grassroots movement to fight against this super PAC that has come up with a cynical approach to drive fear into parents and business leaders that is unwarranted. We know that with 1,000 vacant classrooms without permanent teachers, our students are not getting a fair chance. And we know that those vacancies happen more in the demographically lower areas. We know that this is additional inequity. 2 years ago, we did a survey from Parents of Public Schools of all of our legislators here in Hawaii, and we found that out of 66 responded. We asked them if they had gone to private school or public school, and if they sent their children to public or private, or their grandchildren. Out of the 66 respondents, 24 had school-aged children. 11 send them to private schools, almost half. How can we get people in this state to understand that we can't deal with lacks in our public school system simply by sending kids to private school? We have got to create equity so that all the students have a fair chance. One of the arguments that we've heard from this super PAC is that Hawaii is not a good place to do business. You know, the main factor, the largest factor in being a good place to do business is to have a career-ready population of workers. We, by sending students to schools that do not have permanent teachers, are building a pipeline to prison and disappointment instead of a pipeline to successful careers. We believe if we want to be business friendly, we've got to have appropriate taxes, not a haven for certain investors and developers that then drives the cost of housing up for everyone else. And we've got to see that our public schools are well enough funded that we don't suck parents and students out of the public system and send them to private schools. We have parents all over these islands sending their kids to private schools because they're worried about those vacancies of teachers in the schools. When we ask our members, Parents for Public Schools, we have members on all the islands, we ask them, what's important to you about school? What do you love about school? Almost to a person, the answer is the teachers. When are we going to start to value the teachers enough that we give them a living wage? It's critical that we do this for equity. It's unconscionable that we are sentencing some of our children to a life of disappointment while others are privileged with great educations. For all these reasons, we are favoring a yes vote on the constitutional amendment.
Okay, and we'll take some questions.
Corey, I think one of the points the other side is trying to make is that because of the way this amendment is written, I know you're saying, you know, if it is approved, the legislature, along with the union, would gear it toward investment properties, second homes that are over $1 million. They're saying you're putting a lot of faith in the legislature to do what you want them to do, and even if they do that, what happens in the future when this has become law? Can you count on future lawmakers to do the same thing?
So this is a two-step process. The first this is a two-step process. The first step is passing the constitutional amendment, and the second step will be the enabling language. Everyone agrees. We don't want to go after commercial businesses. We don't want to go after renters. Both sides agree. So if we all agree upon that, then let's have this conversation continue. And what we mean by that is this: we can all agree on what we want. So when the constitutional amendment passes, then we will put in specific legislation what we all agree upon. We're going to go after these wealthy investors. Many of them are not living in Hawaii, that have been driving up the cost of living for everyone. So this is going to be a multi-step process, and we will be putting in language that is specifically going for second homes over $1 million, and that has been the intent of the legislature in the many years that we have pursued this.
But could future lawmakers then change that to in a different way?
There is this huge fear, and that's what they're working on. And it's fear, fear, fear. The idea is that somehow this is going to go after everyone. And the reality is politicians like to get reelected. And the only reason why they're bringing up these issues is because they're unpopular. And that is why it will never happen. You know, we're the only state that does not use property taxes to fund our schools. We have the lowest property tax rate in the entire country. And 1/3 of all property taxes are paid by non-residents. In Maui last year, 52% of all homes were actually purchased by non-residents. So we all agree that this is, you know, people we should tax. Illegal vacation rentals, these are the things we go after. So using fear of something that may happen is just that, it's fear.
And to piggyback on Manolo's question, I mentioned this to Mayor, that the Supreme Court accepted his writ to discuss this with everyone, discuss the so-called vague language. What's your response to that?
The county's lost before and they're going to lose again. This is not some measure that just popped up. This was a measure that was passed by every single legislator except for one. It went through multiple committees. This was heard over 2 years to do this. And so we strongly believe that the county is wasting everyone's time. They're wasting taxpayers' money to do this. And instead of being focused on emboldened to these outside investors, I mean, what are they doing to try to improve the lives of the people of Hawaii and trying to improve the lives of our keiki?
Lauren, one of the arguments that the mayors were making earlier today was that if you just tried to tax the second homes valued at more than $1 million or more, $2 million or whatever it is, you're not really going to get to the number that you're seeking. And so that thus the legislature or whoever's trying to reach that number is going to have to expand it to go broader, to start looking at other sources of revenue. What do you say to that argument?
And this is sad again that they consistently are trying to use fear. We believe that the revenue generated will be between $200 and $400 million. And this is based on the current amount of second homes in Hawaii that are valued over $1 million. And all we're asking is not that these people pay an unfair share, we're asking them to pay a fair share. And if they're paying the national average on the mainland, they should be paying that same rate here in Hawaii. And it shouldn't be that when you come to Hawaii, that's the problem right now. It's cheaper than it is on the mainland, and that's why we have so many millionaires and corporations coming in buying property that's driving up the cost of living for everyone. We do, if you look at the numbers, we do believe it will generate between $200 to $400 million.
Corey, what is the guarantee that the homes that would be taxed are over $1 million, and it is, as you say, a wealthy foreign investor versus someone who just lives here and has a second home and is using it as an investment property and they're renting it out? So
about 4% of homes in Hawaii are second homes over $1 million, and of that, only about 25% of those, or less than 1% of all homes in Hawaii, are second homes over $1 million owned by local residents. There was an example I shared last night, Hulalale. This is in Kona. There are these millionaires and billionaires buying these second homes. They had 330 properties. Only 6 of them were owned by local residents. And yes, if you can own 2 homes over $1 million, you can pay a little bit more to invest in our keiki.
They did point out also, an apartment building with several units, even if it's locally owned, that would be affected, and of course then the rent would go.
Absolutely not. Who wants to do this to people? There are ways to create exemptions to protect senior citizens. We've had this in the language before. There are ways to protect apartment buildings. We've had that in the language before, and we would put up the same language again. And it's sad that the only tactic they have is fear. The fear that we're going to go after renters, apartment builders, senior citizens, farmers, commercial businesses. This is a specific taxation that we're trying to do in order to fund our schools. And the one thing is, not once have they ever offered up an answer of how they're going to improve our schools. All they are saying is, we don't want this tax, and they don't want to do anything afterwards. So again, this is a specific measure. And do either of you want to add something onto this?
They did point out that maybe it would be a good idea to do an audit on how much money is being put in education to see if that could be done. Do you think that's a good idea or not at all?
An audit, go ahead, do an audit, except for the problem is this. We do an audit, then they'll come up with another excuse. What an audit would show is this, that we spend $6,000 less than similar districts on the mainland. The audit will show that we're 45th in the nation in per pupil expenditure. The audit will show that we're last in teacher pay. I mean, the audit's going to show that there's many other data sources that show the problem that's going on. And what they're basically trying to say is, let's not fund our schools. Let's continue to make the problem worse. And look, even in Hawaii, our private schools spend about $10,000 to $20,000 more per pupil, and they don't have to deal with 53% of our students are economically disadvantaged. Over 10% of our students are special education. We have ELL students. All those are very expensive. The reality is, and any teacher can tell you by the conditions we have in the classroom, and you can look at the buildings that we have, we are not well funded, and that the audit is just an excuse and one more roadblock to make sure that we don't fund our schools. And I'm going to let Deb and the two Debs, if you guys want to add something there on that one.
Sure. I just wanted to say all of the arguments we're hearing are excuses to slow this down. We really can't afford to lose another year of students going to school and not having a prepared teacher. Why are they not looking at the fact that we have thousands and thousands of students whose lives are being wasted? How can we consciously do this to these students? All of the fears that they bring up, that they play on, have to do with them talking about vagueness. But we know that a constitutional amendment can't be specific. It's got to be evergreen. It's got to last. It's got to be general. We all know this is a process. We're looking for all the parents, all the community members, all the businesses to rise up and say, our children deserve a quality education and we must fund it. This is step one by passing this Con-Am. We have step two and we have step three. And if there's an audit, that's great. We can employ more techniques to further improve it. We're already at the low end of administrative costs compared to other states. But if we can find other economies, great. We are not going to find enough in that method to fund the teacher salaries we must fund to have an equitable education for our kids.
I think you covered it.
Corey, what types of guarantees do you have from lawmakers that the tax will be expanded beyond what you're seeking and that general funding for education will be cut and replaced by this?
So people are following the debate for the last 2 years. Never once have the fears been used. It's been this conversation. And if you look at what people said on the floor, what they said in debate, it was always a conversation of second homes over $1 million. And then one thing I can say is this. One of the beauties of this constitutional amendment is we're having a great conversation in Hawaii about how do we fund our schools and why we need to fund our schools. And if the ballot dies, all of a sudden those conversations end. I think that everyone agrees on certain things. We need to fund our schools better. We need to pay our teachers better. We need to improve our facilities. We are also asking that we're be more accountable and be more efficient. There's nothing to say that those kind of conversations cannot continue once this bill passes, and making sure that everything that we agree upon can be put into the enabling language. Again, this is only the first step of a multi-step process.
Mayor Caldwell specifically raised the concern that funds from the general fund could be cut and then substituted with revenue from this tax, which would result in a not much of a net change. Is that a concern that you have, and will you work to prevent that from happening?
I think that's going to be paramount for everyone to fight for that. And I want to again point that our opponents offer no way of increasing funding for our schools. And they're going to say, if you do this, no matter what you do, you can never guarantee it, so therefore we should do nothing. There's one thing that we can guarantee, and the one guarantee would be is this. If this constitutional amendment does not pass, then there is a 100% guarantee we will not fund our schools, and then we'll have to wait to see how many more teachers we're going to lose, how many more buildings we're going to have that are falling down, how many more children that we have that are going to be drinking from dirty water fountains and using broken restrooms. And that's the one guarantee that we have right now. This is an opportunity and a hope to actually do something to improve our schools. And there are ways to make sure it cannot be supplanted. We can put in that language they cannot reduce the budget. We can put stuff into the teacher's contract to make sure that they cannot reduce it. So there are ways, if they are concerned about it, if they truly believe that we must increase funding and they are worried about supplanting, then they should be with us to make sure that that cannot happen. But right now, the only thing they're trying to do is just kill it, and then they will not care the next day about what happens to the funding of our schools in Hawaii.
Corey, in general, what are the roadblocks that you face
Sorry, just
What
need
are
a
the
drink there.
roadblocks that you faced over the years of the legislature trying to get funding for teachers, and now you're at this juncture?
So, for the last 3 years, there's only 4 ways to really fund education. You have the general excise tax, the TAT, the hotel tax, the income tax, and the property tax. We have tried 3 of the 4. And the same people that are complaining about this tax have fought us every single way. They came out, the Chamber of Commerce was against the GET. You know, the realtors were against the GET. They fought against the TAT. So it just shows you that no matter what we do, they're going to fight against it. One of the solutions they've had is the school impact fees. And the same organizations that are saying now that we can use school impact fees to get funding for our schools were the same ones to fight against using school impact fees. So the reality is they just don't believe, in everything else is an excuse, but they just don't believe we should increase funding for our schools at all.
Now, Corey, the DOE operates under a nearly $2 billion budget, yet some teachers are still paying out of pocket to operate their classrooms. But given those numbers, where is the disconnect that you guys are lacking funds? Because like Manolo's saying, they're calling, the opposite side is calling on an internal audit. So is the fix internal?
See, $2 billion without context doesn't mean anything. Hawaii is the 10th largest school district in the United States. The way to compare apples to apples is the per pupil expenditure. And that's when we drop to 45th in the nation. That's when we know we're $6,000 less than our competitive districts. That's why we know we're $10,000 to $20,000 less than our private schools. So $2 billion means nothing. The reality is we spend about $13,000 per pupil. But if you look at a regular education student, it's about $10,000. It's our special education students that are very expensive. And by the way, our private schools do not have to pay for those special education students. So no matter how you cut it, we spend a lot less than both our private schools and other public schools across the country.
And given what my colleague was saying, because pay is operated through collective bargaining, maybe you could reiterate again, how do we know that those funds, the additional funds, will go toward public schools?
So the first thing we can agree upon is this. If everyone agrees that we need to increase funding, if everyone agrees we need to increase teacher pay, how do we do it? And there are ways to protect it. The legislature, in the enabling language, can make sure that you do not decrease the DOE budget. We can put language in the teacher contract, and then by law, they have to pay for that contract. So there are ways to guarantee that we make sure that we do the things that we all agree should be happening in our public schools.
I know this is just a handful of teachers. Are all teachers on board for this?
Before this happened, we polled our teachers. And without going into specific numbers, I can say it was not even close. The teachers of Hawaii are the ones that are being faced with it. We're the ones that are dealing with 40 kids in a classroom. We're the ones dealing with 100 classrooms. We're the ones every year that are seeing our colleagues leave to the mainland. And I want to share this story. There was a special education teacher right near here. There was only 2 special education teachers at her school, 1 left, which meant that she not only had to teach her class, she had to teach the other class. And she says, I cannot do it anymore. I'm burning out, I'm about to leave. And the only reason why I stay is for the students. We need to take action now. We are in a crisis now, because if we do not keep our teachers now, there is a point, look, when it comes to special education in the state, we're breaking the law. And for those people that remember with the Felix decree, that cost billions of dollars. And the state eventually is going to get sued and they will lose again. And so the only question is, are we going to be preemptive to make sure that we fund our schools now? Did you want to answer? Okay. Top of my shoulder. Go ahead, Deb, please.
We keep hearing that there may be a problem that they may take money out of the general fund for education, or they may siphon the money from this into a different project. And I've been calling and talking to legislators to ask them, you know, what do we do about this? And they've said, you've got to get the parents and the voters out to vote for this. You've got to set the priority for the state. And if this is publicly known, that our voters believe we should back up our teachers and we should do this, those legislators are not going to be able to turn around and secretly or do something that takes the money away. But that is step 2 in our process. We need the support in step 1. Step 2, we're going to have to go and we're going to have to hold everybody's feet to the fire and make sure the right thing happens.
If there are no more questions, just thank you, everyone. We are encouraging everyone to vote yes on this constitutional amendment. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's make sure we find a way to fund our schools and fund our keiki. Thank you.